So that's how we got connected.
And I looked at your website and I watched your video, and I'm too familiar with marketplaces like Angie and Thumbtack and Home Advisor. And in our particular industry, we find that they don't have a play. And I think what I've learned about a lot of those marketplace offerings is that certain industries have better consumer adoption rates or like a simpler path to revenue. Yeah. Whereas other markets and other industries, the lead cost isn't worth the effort you have to put out. Like famously, construction and plumbing, general construction and plumbing are good because high ticket price, the clients are more or less just kind of like selecting. But in some of these lead generators, we're finding like, oh, this is like really hard. And so we've never found in my neck of the woods that those products work, but I'm always open to a new idea.
Yeah, so let me tell you how, because I completely agree with you. But here's how we kind of think we know we're different and why we kind of went that route. So with an Angie or a Thumbtack, what do you want do you want this? This is what I do. Is that what you like? Below the chin, yeah. Ideally, so Angie's and Thumbtack, if you're getting a legitimate lead and it's not fake, which there's multiple lawsuits right now against both of those companies for doing that. Mm-hmm. If you're getting a legitimate lead, it's been sold to 15 different competitors, right? Yeah. So with Angie and Thumbtack, homeowner fills out what they need. That information goes to every guy in that area that can service that job. So that's why Angie's model, the revenue model, is based off of having as many vendors on as possible because they want to sell that same lead for $20 over and over and over and over again. That's their whole revenue model. What we've done, and for that vendor, you don't get a choice. It's sent to you and you're charged. You call right away and the homeowner goes, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. I didn't do that. I don't need that service. Or goes, I'm so sick of getting phone calls because 15, 20 different companies just got their information.
Yeah.
So it's a problem for the homeowner. It's a problem for the business.
Yeah.
Those models don't work, and that's why they have horrible ratings and horrible reviews, and people are sick of using them, and they're stopping using them.
Yeah, Home Advisor, it would be like if you didn't call within literally 5 or 10 seconds, the job would probably be snapped up by somebody else. And I remember talking to a technician at the Home Advisor side of it. I was like, how does this all get sent out at the same time to everyone? He's like, well, actually, different carriers send it out at different moments. He's like, if you're on Sprint, you're actually getting it a couple seconds before.
Oh, yeah.
So there's like all these interesting like tech layers to it that unbalances the field as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. So our process has solved all that, even with the different carriers portion. So let's say a homeowner goes on and says, I want my handyman or whatever. That job gets posted. Every handyman in the area sees the opportunity, kind of like on a social feed. They just see the job pop up. They see first name of the customer, address, the description of the job, and an estimate, so a virtual estimate. The company can then change the price based on what they know. They can select times that they're available to go out and do the job or perform the estimate, whatever the service is, put in a little note, and hit send offer. They haven't been charged anything yet, so there's no subscription fee for the company. There's no cost to say throw your hat in the ring. You're only charged if that homeowner then sees your offer and goes, these guys look great. I see all their Google reviews right here. I see their message to me. I see pictures that we pull from your Google ID. I want them. Select. That's when the company's charged, which is exactly what if you get on any of the Reddit channels or talk to any vendor, they're charged no matter what on an Angie or Thumbtack. Here, what we want to do is provide solutions to the homeowner at a convenience so that we want to encourage every company to throw in an offer and then not be discouraged because they're afraid they're going to get charged. They're only going to get charged if the company says, yes, I choose you.
So it's funny because you introduce this like it's a revolutionary concept, but let's break it down and go away from the service industry and think conceptually about this in business. Yeah. So all you're basically saying is that for a connector, or you could even call that person a salesperson, there is a commission once money trades hands or there's a transaction. So you have someone who has money and someone who has ability, and you're matching these two parties. And if you are the matchmaker, then there is a sales commission, or a fee to connect those. This is like one of the most classic concepts in all of business. And so how did we get to a place where we've weirdly organically grown into a world where we're not monetizing the transaction, with a fee structure. We're monetizing the consumer potential and the vendor desire. And these things are outside of the transaction, either preceding it or kind of clouded around it. And those businesses, I mean, it's so philosophically screwed up. Like, I don't even understand how we got here. Because what you're basically offering is not a new idea. No. It's the oldest of ideas.
It's what's crazy is it's the oldest of ideas, but put into a structure of tech. It's put into an industry where it doesn't quite exist right now, right? At a third party level. The idea and model exists in the form of a salesperson, right? The problem is most of these people can't afford sales people full time. Most of these companies can't, even though we're targeting kind of the more known companies that have some structure around them. But yeah, you're exactly right. It's like the how we got here and how Angie's became Angie's and how Thumbtack became Thumbtack is beyond me. I think they've used a tactic of make it really good for the first month to hook them, sign that contract for a year or whatever, get their money, and then we don't care anymore, right? So what we've done, which is kind of revolutionary in the on-demand home services world, is we've built a product specifically for the homeowner. So our customer is the homeowner. Our theory is we solve homeowner pain points, then we bring the homeowners, the businesses will stay and come on, right? Especially if it still benefits them. But make no mistake about it, what truly makes us different is we are built for the homeowner first in mind and their pain points.
So Porch.com is running a similar game book or playbook, trying to create a concierge energy for the consumer, for the homeowner, and saying, let us be your resource, let us be your trustworthy sort of entity that you're coming to, and then we will feed it out. And they have different models of how they're bringing revenue in. And so they have actually kind of gotten deep into my world in the home inspection and pest control world, because they're recognizing that home inspectors specifically are some of the first man on site, tip of the spear, who is knowledgeable of a transaction and new home ownership. Famously, you can pull down leads after there is a closing through public data. But like, who knows about the information beforehand? And so Porch has got its hooks pretty deep in the inspection industry at this point, because it recognizes that the data play for who is at a house right before it sells, who is knowledgeable of who's going to be a future new homeowner right before they do. And so that's interesting that you're going that direction for that concierge kind of client focus, because it is right. That's what the client wants and needs, but you can't just rape and pillage the other side of the coin.
That's
and I think that the other softwares are really doing that. They're trying to either create a vendor contractor focus, and they're kind of screwing over the consumer. That was actually the old Angie's List model. Even though it maybe started with a good idea, kind of got out of hand. And then the Thumbtack and the Angie of today, it largely focuses on the consumer focus and then screws over the contractor vendor. It's a zero-sum game philosophy that, like, you can't satisfy both parties. But as you pointed out, you can. But my curiosity, as I learn more about my home, is to understand, how are you building and burning capital in which to create this product without necessarily a guarantee of transactions, if you're trying to still build a momentum around consumers who know who you are and vendors who are willing to trust your brand?
Yeah, dude. I mean, fantastic questions. And first off, it's a difficult problem to solve, right? So I don't want to not be honest about that. The problem about home services is every homeowner has their own flavor, right? So you really have to, and then every industry is different. So you have to solve a lot of problems and create a product that solves many different problems. And in tech, it's not really what tech does, right? Tech doesn't solve different problems at once most of the time. Now, we do have some interesting capabilities with AI in the future that can help with that. But so, you asked a question about burning capital, trying to get momentum, get the flywheel kind of started. And, that's kind of the name of the game in tech, right? We are venture-backed. We're lucky to have great investors and partners behind us. Because we know that this is going to take money, time, and capital in order to get the flywheel turning. What our focus is in order to do that is Nashville, right? So we do have customers in other states that are posting jobs. We want to get to them, but what we are focusing on is one city, doing it correct in one city, and then expanding to hundreds of cities after that, right? Getting the flywheel started is the hardest part about any marketplace startup. It's understanding supply and demand. And then there's levels of supply and demand within the supply and demand you have to understand. So for us, what that means is like there's a level of handyman companies supply and demand versus total number of companies supply and demand versus population in different areas in different cities. So to answer your question is, we've got over 100 companies that are on the platform right now. We cover around 40 different industries. It costs them nothing to be on it, right? And that's the easy sell there. They're not charged anything unless they're chosen. That's an easy sell there, right? So the two main things that they need and want, we're providing. So honestly, getting companies to sign on and say, yeah, I'll give this a shot has been pretty easy because there's really no downside to them right now. The tough part is getting homeowners to start using it and getting that flywheel turning. And that just does take time, repetition.
That's an old grind.
Yeah, exactly. So, we like I said, we are backed financially, so we're in a good spot where we can take our time and do that right. But I think more importantly, it's if you've ever read The Cold Start Problem by Peter Thiel, it's a book about getting marketplaces going, right? Yeah. And it's like, you can look at PayPal, which is Peter Thiel, and see how they did it. Other than paying people to use it, which is what PayPal did, we're kind of throwing the kitchen sink at incentives, offers, and stuff like that, and trying to get homeowners really, really involved. I think our goal is to have 100 people really, really love us rather than 1,000 people that kind of have it and use it, and create that kind of community, which eventually starts the flywheel and then it gets it going. It scales from there.
So speaking of Peter, you start to introduce unicorn energy, right? Like not simply just who's going to hit that high point and become a true unicorn, but when you're having to invent a category and educate a populace about a new category while trying to sell said category, this is really hard. And this is the really difficult inertia and like difficult balance around innovation.
Yep.
Where when you're innovating, you are going to naturally hit up against a population, vendors, contractors, adjacent parties who are like, whoa, this is new and I'm uncomfortable with it. I want to stay right where I am.
Right.
That's humanity. And so trying to be like, not referencing the people that you are innovating against in which to describe yourself.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, hey, I'm like that crappy person, but I'm better.
Right.
Like I'm finding that over the years in my industry, I've done actually a pretty bad job at this. I've been poor with my words, and I love words and I love rhetoric, and I feel like you should be able to find the best words to describe it. But sometimes I'm at a lack for words to say, here's how we're innovating. We're innovating by reacting against the bad thing.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's kind of a weak way to think about it.
Really?
Well, I don't know if you can get away from it, but I don't want to start with putting myself in an adjacent category. I'm so desperate on the innovation front that I want to have an entire other box, and so to plant the seed in my client's mind that I'm even remotely in the same box, but a better apple in the mix is a difficult balance because we have to work with consumers' limited vision if they are not yet caught the vision. And so that's tough.
100%, man. And I go back and forth on this, to be honest. And I think you're probably, most of the people I talk to take your side of it. I think I'm probably the minority. And for us, at least in our unique position, I take two sides. If I'm talking to a company or a vendor that we're trying to get on, I am going to more than likely introduce the Angie or the Thumbtack and the bads that we're trying to write quicker in the first 5 or 10 seconds, because that's immediately where all of their minds go.
Oh, contractors.
Right, contractors.
Vendors. Yeah, 100%.
But for homeowners, I think it's probably best we don't bring it up at all, right? So we kind of have two sides of it, because I almost want to get to it first, because as I'm talking, I see the contractor going, this sounds like fucking Angie's. And I have been burned by them. So I want to introduce it right as they're thinking that. And then they go, okay, that's kind of cool. And then they hear our background. They go, okay, they've actually felt that pain too.
Yep.
So I kind of take both sides of it. But I agree. It's hard to market and, bad mouth unless it's been so bad, like on the vendor side, that it does kind of benefit you.
Yeah, I think that this idea that you're not overtly selling something, neither product nor service, you fit somewhere in between, where it's like when you're going to the vendor, you're not really selling them, something that's going to hit their bottom line straight away.
Right.
And when you're going to the client, you're not really hitting them with a product that they need to adopt and then subsequently pay for. So there is a connecting. And honestly, I guess if you go back to like American business and history, imports and exports and connections and commissions and sales, like it is all connected to this idea of I know that person and this other person over here need to be connected, and I'm going to take a piece of the action to make that connection.
Right. Yes. And then if you can remove all of the friction and doing that connection to where previously there was significant friction, then people are far more likely to pay that fee or that finder's fee or that commission, whatever the example is, right? So like the example we always give is, in the 90s, we were going on a road trip. You'd pull out the map.
Right.
Directions were a very forward thought, right? Otherwise, if you didn't have a map, you didn't know how to get there.
Right.
Now you get in the car, and the last thing you think about is how am I going to navigate there? You pull out your phone, and it's like that, right? You don't even have to have a GPS in the car anymore. It's just on your phone, you're good to go. So, like, people, to remove that amount of friction, that's a kind of a poor example of people willing to pay for things because, well, it's on their phone. But if you can remove that amount of friction to where the original was, this is an actual task for me and I have to think about it constantly when I'm doing the thing I'm trying to do, to now it's not even a thought, is beyond valuable for people. And that's where you get people who are willing to pay for something. So that's our goal with maintenance, right? Right now, there's so many homeowners, especially where we're at with the age of homeowners and how they grew up, that don't know what to do, when to do it. And I fall in this category too, and I've been in these industries. How often should you change your filter? What type of filter should you have? When should I be draining my water heater? How often should I flush that? How often should I get my HVAC serviced? Who can I trust? Why is this information not just prevalent right away in a trustworthy area? So like what we'd like to do is make that an afterthought for the homeowner. Yeah. Hit the easy button and understand that your largest investment, the thing you spend the most money on, is taken care of. So that's kind of our goal.
The irony is this is not new territory for us when we start to transfer the idea of maintenance and knowledge to outside parties, because this has already happened in the automotive industry. Once upon a time, when our grandparents and great-grandparents were doing things, there was largely very few people that were going to outsiders to maintain homes and automobiles. That was largely done internally. And so we now live in a world where a huge vast majority of people do not maintain their own car. And actually, automotive manufacturers have made it to where it's actually very difficult to overcome that problem. Similarly, I would say that your population has an equally low understanding of home maintenance, and the complexity even to understand what needs to be done has gone up. So homes are more complex, similar to the way automobiles are more complex. And so unfortunately, our consumer population hasn't yet adopted an automotive mindset around like, I got to get my oil changed at Jiffy Lube. Like so many people do that very, very willingly, or I got to get my tires rotated or my transmission flushed. Like these are now in the common popular mindset. And so it's just not the same way with home maintenance and knowledge acquisition about home maintenance, or actually following through with the service on home maintenance.
Yes.
And so this is a problem. And I've actually seen a couple startups over the last 15 years really try to take the concepts of property management in the investor world and move it over to what has been maybe termed as like home management, which I'm not sure is a super great term, because I don't think homeowners yet categorically have this idea of like, I need an outsider to maintain my house.
Right.
Home Depot is still pushing the idea. They're like, no, you maintain your house.
Yeah, you can do it DIY.
Yeah, and I think that there's some truth and merit to that, and I want people to do that. I want people to become like savvy homeowners and do self-maintenance. However, it just doesn't happen.
It's not realistic.
It's not realistic.
Yeah.
We are too segmented of a society from a knowledge base. We're too focused on our niches that we're working on, whatever.
And the other side of that is like we're kind of getting into like who our ideal customer is, and we're figuring that out. But one thing I thought it was going to be was like the 40 to 60 year old. I think it's going to be more like the 30 to 45 year old.
Totally.
Like we just had a customer the other day, young guy, he's probably around my age, right? Young 30s, MBA, banker, successful, young professional, owns his house, posted a job on my home, got it scheduled, got it fixed. He left a review and said that previously he would have just left something like this alone because he wouldn't have known who to call or how to fix it. And he would have waited until his parents came down and gave him shit about not fixing the issue,
Nice.
right? And he was like, this is just so much simpler. And that was where I was like, oh, shoot. So maybe our customer is like not the, 55-year-old or 50-year-old who's doing these things. It's probably the young professionals who, A, have the ability to probably own the home or purchase the home, live in a home, but also value their time over the skill of learning how to do the DIY stuff.
Sure.
It's not an interest anymore, right?
I think the consumer population, and I think it's somewhat obvious to both of us now that it's whoever has been using apps to solve other problems in their life. Mm-hmm. And the younger boomer side that you might have been focusing on, they're not using apps to solve problems. It's going to be your elder millennials and progressively more and more of your younger generations who have been hooked on apps that solve problems.
Big time, dude.
Yeah.
Big time. Nailed it. That's exactly right. That's cool. So I want to talk about your business a little bit. So because you've been very generous in going through that, and that was fun. I can talk about that all day.
Sure.
So tell us about your business, man. How'd you get into it?
Yeah, so I came up in the construction industry,
Okay.
kind of old school, and swung a hammer for a number of years out of school, and just realized, I'm watching my father, who is a contractor, kind of have more limited options than more options, and just sort of a more simpler and ceiling-based trajectory. There wasn't a lot beyond just owning a small little construction company. Yeah. And I was like, okay, this is I could follow in these footsteps easily. I've been eating and breathing this for a lot of years as a kid and as a teenager. And now I have an option to kind of jump ship out of construction and into the business world. And I didn't study business. I didn't know anything about business. In fact, I once swore I would never wear a button-up shirt. But nice. I didn't pick a great time to jump from construction into business because in late 2008, a little something happened called the recession.
What's that?
That was just a hard time to break out. Yeah. And what those intervening years in 8, 9, 10, 11, I was just hustling and kind of meeting people and kind of working construction, this and that, around home services. And I started to learn about the real estate side of the construction world, the intersection between where the built environment touches both construction and real estate.
Cool.
And so someone told me about this job called a home inspector. And I was like, well, what is a home inspector and how can I do it? Mm-hmm. You're telling me I can just talk about the technical world and I don't actually have to swing a hammer or turn a wrench anymore?
Sounds great.
That sounds great. I like to talk about construction things. And so I started doing some research and I kind of jumped in feet first and realized, this is a great industry that you can start small. It has sort of like an artisan feeling, single practitioners. But unlike a lot of industries that kind of feel like the playbook's been written and you just kind of have to follow it now, this one felt still fresh and new and like there was still trail to be cut.
Right. And
particularly, I had come from California where there's a lot more earlier development in the business world, and I was moving to Nashville where everything's about 10 or 15 years behind. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, maybe I can kind of take this industry that is a little old school and I can zhuzh it up and make it, flashy and tech oriented. 15 years ago, nobody had a website or, a social media or, anything tech related just wasn't happening in the home inspection industry, which largely played to old retired contractors. Yep. Who else knew enough about, a home, what consumers were looking for? They were looking for a white-haired old man, like their own grandfather, to tell them what's going on in the house.
This old house,
right.
They wanted.
Exactly. And so I definitely encountered some resistance early on with people being like, okay, 30-year-old guy who seems to be a fast talker, do you actually know what's going on?
Right.
And I quickly learned that age was a liability, but that I could overcome it with just sheer volume of knowledge. And so my encouragement to any young entrepreneur is use knowledge as your pole vaulting pole. let that or your leveraging stick, let that leverage you into wherever you're going, because you can't stop having no experience at what you're doing. You can't stop being the age that you are. Even if you get into an industry, whatever it is, late in life, like I'm trying to get into software and tech and SaaS now, you just got to like dig in as hard as you can. And so I just dug into the knowledge side of it. And it played to my strengths because I already knew a fair amount about the built environment, but now I had to apply all the frameworks and the rules, and I actually had to read the IRC instead of just like vaguely know how two boards went together.
Yeah.
And so I was able to put some flash and some shine on what felt to be kind of a bit of a fuddy-duddy old industry. And it just so happened, as you may remember, that a lot of things by 2012 to 2016 were starting to kind of get on the rise. And honestly, in 2016, we thought we'd hit the big time.
Right.
Oh man, it's skyrocketed prices. And I remember I live up near the city center in East Nashville, where no one would live there in 2011. But by 2016, the prices had doubled or tripled, and I thought to myself, "Oh man, we missed it. Oh man, we missed it. The prices are just so high now. We can't buy anything. Oh, it's so terrible." And of course, we all know that the incline of increased valuation of real estate, and the people moving to Nashville and the businesses and the culture that has grown up over these last 8 years now has been double or triple what it was between like 11 and 16, which was like that first big area of growth for Nashville.
Right.
And so I just kind of I caught the wave at the right time. And if anybody's a surfer who's listening, they're like, you can paddle pretty hard, but if you don't kind of catch the wave at the right time, it's not 100% going to make. And so part of it's the paddling and part of it's the wave. Sometimes you don't paddle hard enough, that's on you. Yep. Sometimes the wave just breaks wrong. Well, that's just life.
Yep.
And so
timing.
Yeah, timing. And that, as a younger entrepreneur, no surprise to anyone, I thought I was doing it all. It was all my paddling that had got me where I was. Right. Yeah. But now I think I can say easily, no, yeah, luck played a big part of it.
Yeah.
Just the wave and the swells and the breaking of the wave, like there was luck component of it. I was in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
And so I paddled hard to try and build something that was bigger than me. That was basically one of my first things. I took an industry that was largely an artisan and an individual, so think like single owner operator oriented business, right? It's simple: man, ladder, truck, flashlight. Simple formula.
Yep.
But getting it beyond that it used to be very complex. I still think it's pretty complex, because people wanted, at least in the past, to innately trust the single guy. That guy was the guy who was going to pick up the phone. He was going to drive over in his truck. He was going to do the work. And then after he did the work, he was going to send you the report. And after you got the report, you could call him up and ask him questions.
Yep.
And it was all the same guy.
Yep.
And there was something comfortable in that because we're hearkening back to older ideas of like, who do we trust? We trust the dad, the grandpa, or even further back, hundreds of years, we trust the artisan who literally touched every part and piece of it. Mm-hmm. And so I was not, as a younger guy, I was like, I'm not going to just be in a crawl space for the rest of my life. That's basically no different than what I was going to be doing in construction. I was like, I got to build this beyond me. I got to figure out how to take a product and get people to believe in the process, not the man.
Yep.
And I think I'm not entirely sure I was successful at that, but that has been the goal.
That is incredibly challenging, though.
It is very challenging. And so to grow beyond myself and then transfer that belief and that consumer trust from me to someone else, I'm realizing was hard. Again, the folly of youth is the belief that, it's all going to work out perfectly. And then you sort of realize a number of years later in reflection, oh, I guess I did kind of have a bunch of those things in me that were all kind of able to meet in the center and create the beginning of something. And then trying to replicate that, trying to copy yourself in others is just not possible. And so you have to build a framework around you that is not 100% copy.
Yeah.
You have to have a team, and you have to know what the consumer's wanting in you that they're willing to sacrifice a little bit to not get, or to get it in a couple different ways. And so, yeah, we swelled with the market. Even through the pandemic, we had that crazy oh no, we're all going to be out of a job, you know.
And you're like, oh, this is the opposite.
Oh no, we got to go got gangbusters,
Right.
you know. That was just a really interesting time. I could talk about the pandemic's effect on the service industry for like hours. But we steadily grew from 13 up through 21, 22, basically year over year, just, you know, huge growth numbers, adding employees, and realizing that the real estate market was in desperate need of a better support structure around the technical aspects of real estate. I think I've learned that the folks involved in real estate are really good at the conveyance of real estate, the transferring from one person to another. You've got people handling the money side. You got people handling the legality and title and, you know, law side. And you got people handling the people side. That's the realtors. Mm-hmm. And so the conveyance of like one person to another, that we're good.
That system works.
That system is like time honored, like 100 years or more of like
billions of transactions.
Yes.
Yeah.
Truly having clients and quite honestly, the rest of the participants technically understand the product which is being conveyed or transferred has gotten worse over time.
Yes.
And it's the same reason we just talked about with this consumer population that just kind of knows less than what our grandparents knew, right? Yep. Like grandpa could fix the fence and milk the cow and fix the tractor and like do it all, right? And so when he went to buy a house, he was his own home inspector. There was no need for home inspectors back in the day.
Yep.
Totally redundant. People just understood the products. They were simpler products. They worked a little simpler. And they were just more accustomed to having that technical knowledge. Well, we don't live in that world anymore. So that means our mortgage loan officers, our title officers, our realtors, and our consumers, sellers and buyers, well, they're all just newer, younger people than they were 100 years ago. So they all just know less. And so the rise of the need for a technical understanding of the built environment goes back to home maintenance, just like we were talking about, is more and more. And so the home inspector has existed as a person who shines the light on what's going on. But it's fraught with all these problems in real estate because it is, for better or for worse, a block to the goal of real estate, which is closing and the transferring, and a sale. And so, unfortunately, there are some participants in the transaction, in fact, literally everyone except the home inspector, whose entire commission and financial structure is borne out upon the closing table, and so the home inspector has accidentally turned from consumer advocate, which I think is the truest form of what the inspector is supposed to be, into sometimes a bit at odds with some of the other professional participants because you're introducing information that kind of makes everything more complicated.
100%, dude.
Yeah.
That is, first off, you're an incredibly smart guy, and this is an awesome conversation. So thank you for coming in. And I could do this for hours as well.
Cheers.
So, I want to touch on a couple things there. The first one is kind of where you were ending on that, which was the knowledge or lack of knowledge when it comes to not only like the process of buying a home. Most people do that just a couple times in their life, right? It is by far, per capita, the largest purchase any American will make in their entire life. Yet it is the one purchase we make with zero information.
I know.
We buy from Amazon and read 50 reviews before we buy a $30 product, right? We buy a car and we test drive it. We get the Carfax for it. We take it to a mechanic and it gets inspected, right? And then we purchase it. We do all of these things for all of these products, materials, whatever, other parts of our life that have such little impact compared to what your house is. And there is no option on the market that solves that for the homeowner for multiple reasons. Number one, I think you have to be, to your point, somewhat of an expert on a lot of different things as a homeowner. That's never going to happen.
Right.
So we have to create something that allows the homeowner to not be the expert, but gives them a trusted thing that is the expert and puts it in layman's terms. Our goal with my home is to, with time and volume, we would like to become the Carfax for your home. If these property details are stored within the property itself, And that way, when you're moving into a home on top of your home inspection, you know that for the last 10 years, this guy's got his filter changed by this company every 3 months, right? You can bet that that system, that HVAC system, is going to have a better life and probably give you a couple more years than if they weren't doing that type of maintenance. Same thing with all of the other systems in the home, right? The exterior, the roof, the plumbing, the electrical, you name the HVAC systems. So, it's just bonkers to me that, and I'm one of the ones too. We have a couple houses, bought a couple, sold a couple. It's like I didn't know anything, and I still barely know anything about the process or about what you're buying, other than just like, okay, I've got this report, looks great to me. Still, even if you and the inspectors do everything right, in a year you could be purchasing a new roof because you don't have any clue what was going on in that house for the last 10 years.
We are in such a awkward stage as a consumer population because we don't live in an old world where it's totally analog and we understand technical things. But we also don't live in the future where everything is smart, like the promise of smart home features.
Right.
So I envision a world, and we're dang close, but we're still not there yet. I envision a world where every aspect of your home has like a smart feature feeding back to what I would call like a black box.
Yeah.
And it goes into the closet. And the black box is a durable, never changing, never moving, like brain center for like what has happened in the home. And it can be referenced by any professional or any homeowner throughout the life of that home, which could be 100 or 200 years.
That's great.
And so when you paint the home, it's logged. When the appliances go down, it's logged. Everything is logged, and then it becomes a reference point. Mm-hmm. Similar to the way that a doctor goes into a room and first looks at a patient's chart, because the chart is like the black box. Mm-hmm. It's the thing you reference first, and then when you have any actions that take place with that patient, you log that additional information into the black box. So we don't live in that future yet, where we can trust the continuity of information because the technical and like digital world is so all-encompassing. We live somewhere betwixt this analog world and this future digital world. And so we as practitioners, whether it's the software side or the service side, we're still fighting through a population that 30 minutes outside of Nashville wouldn't have anything digital in their home if their life depended on it.
That's right.
And people who are in the literal center downtown high-rises, maybe the entire, condo is digital.
Right.
And so the disparity between these two Americans who are 30 minutes away from each other in just one part of the country is massive. So we're serving many Americas and many consumer bases without the ability to codify and say, oh, well, I'm Google, so I'll push out this giant product. No, we're just like regular people trying to like do services better or create continuity. In fact, this is one of the issues that we as inspectors would love to figure out, because recurrent revenue, constant like knowledge acquisition for a homeowner, like come to my house and inspect it on a regular basis, would be a beautiful thing. Man, we could just kill it from a revenue and a business model standpoint if we could get recurrent revenue with clients. But categorically, people don't yet have a category in their mind for recurrent knowledge or recurrent maintenance on their home. You'll pay God knows what for Netflix and all of these other, health apps or whatever services. We have categories for a wide variety of weird things, but not home maintenance. And I'll tell you, I've seen a few people try it on the app side, on the service side, and kind of flame out a little bit, because people just kind of say, it hasn't really affected my life very much. I don't really need that $19 a month charge or whatever it is.
Right.
And so it's very difficult, and I think it's going to be the biggest marker of what the software and the service industry, or maybe the joining of the two, like the biggest change is going to come from solving this problem.
I completely agree. It's still amazing that, you take your car in for an oil change, you go to the doctor, you have antivirus on your computers, yet homeowners are completely, and it's sometimes not their fault. There's not an option for them. They might want to do this. Most of the time, that's the feedback we're getting, right? It's like, yes, I want to do that. I just don't know where to go to turn to do it. Something that you were talking about, the black box stuff that we're trying to also do, it's our ideal world is, you have the house has like 8 to 10 systems. Let's call the roof, the exterior, siding, gutters, plumbing, HVAC, electrical.
I can't believe you put gutters as its own category. That's a pretty
siding,
tiny
gutters,
thing.
Siding and gutters.
Yeah. All right. I'll go with it.
Is that all right?
Yeah, sure.
So whatever amount of systems there are, right? As you know, most homeowners don't know, all those systems from the day you install them or the day it gets built are decaying at different rates.
Right.
And there is no way to tell at what rate each one of those are decaying and what I can do as a homeowner to slow the decay or prep for the inevitable replacement and what time that's going to happen. There's no reason that in this world we shouldn't know exactly when my HVAC system is going to fail.
Yeah, dude, why don't we have like a little screen with a health bar?
Right.
And each system is like marching the health bar down over time.
Yeah.
Why don't we have, I mean, in the world of tech and like server space, you have all these sensors which can sense when servers are going to fail.
Yes.
Why don't we have like little sensors on all of our consumer appliances that are measuring like when there's failure points?
Yeah, and then you do some maintenance and it bumps up a little bit, and you can see the decay slow through preventative maintenance. And you're like, look at that! I'm pushing off that $10,000 purchase by spending $13 a quarter.
Dude, how gratifying would that be?
I know.
To be seeing your future costs be delayed further and further.
Yes,
that's sick.
Yeah, so like I think we can do that. I think we can do that with time, and honestly, AI is going to be a tremendous help on some of that stuff.
Yeah, because the volume and the scale is so hard.
Yeah.
I'm envisioning, AI visual recognition of roof condition could be an interesting way through like maybe drone or something like that to get you this idea of roof health over time. Because people say, it's a 25-year roof. I'm like, that is a made-up thing. That's made up blah, blah by the manufacturers. That has no bearing on reality.
Right.
You could have a 5-year roof. You could have a 45-year roof. It's just going to depend on like weather and your orientation of your home and like how hot your attic is and all this kind of other stuff.
Yep.
And so if you could have a health bar because there was eyes on site somehow, I don't know, drones or satellites or I don't know, robots or something. I mean, that is like next level stuff that I'm talking about here.
Yeah, dude. And I honestly think, and tell me this, I'm very interested in your opinion on this. AI, I think, in the future, and this comes with volume of data on the house, right? If we know enough about the house, location, type of shingle, when the roof was installed, who installed it, those types of things, and we know, okay, it's 5 years old. There was just a windstorm of 80-mile-per-hour winds that went through the area. We know with this type of shingle, this type of install, this type of roof, this age of roof, and location of the house and all that stuff, we know at a 75% success rate that they're going to have shingles missing and they need to have a roof inspection. So our goal there would be say, hey, here's this information in a notification or whatever, the simplest way for the consumer to digest that. To go just click here, schedule, free inspection. Roofer comes out and goes, yeah, you do have damage. What we're finding is people don't know when to call, who to call when certain things happen.
Categorically, we already have the muscle memory for this in the automotive world. It's called a check engine light with a specific check engine code.
Right.
Like we already know how to do this in automotive. We just can't quite transfer it over to homes. And that's so frustrating.
Yeah.
And some of this is already taking place at really deep layers in the business world, specifically like the insurance and the actuarial side of insurance. They're doing predictive numbers. For example, if there's a storm that goes through and you have a storm chaser, adjuster that goes through and he's saying this roof needs to be done, the insurance company isn't just taking his word for it. They're double checking their models, their actuarial models, which says wind, life, location, heat index, heating degree days, cooling degree days, whatever.
Yep.
And they're saying, if the adjuster says, then we will also agree.
Right.
So this is happening in a human capacity with some like tech formulas, but no, it's not happening in like a cool, smooth and shiny process concept.
Right.
And I think there's so many opportunities here. I'm so curious to see who's going to steal my genius idea around indoor air quality prediction, because this is something that we deal with in the inspection world. People want to know, hey, I'm getting into a new home and you're going to tell me about like the walls and the windows and the roof and the pipes, but can you tell me about like the invisible things, the indoor air quality.
Yep.
So this is like an adjacent question or adjacent thought or adjacent service that we participate in. And so from a predictive model, we actually have all the data we probably need, but we can't correlate the data, and we certainly haven't built anything to do anything with the data.
That's interesting.
For example, orientation of the home, Google Maps, like the guy who drives around, like that visualization, you could be analyzing trees. They're already putting trees into like the 3D models on Google Maps. Style of structure, number of stories, number of square feet. Like there's a number of things that you could do without ever having to go to a home, which could create these predictive models that says, well, if you live in the Philadelphia area in a home that's 80 years old and it's 2 stories and it's in this neighborhood which has a lot of trees and it's facing north or south, I guess, then your likelihood of indoor air quality issues is a 75% likelihood of indoor air quality issues versus that person who lives in a new construction development in Spring Hill, Tennessee that used to be a farm and there's nothing around it.
Right.
And it's hotter than blazes, so nothing's going to grow funky.
Yep. And now for that guy in Philadelphia, here's the recommendations. Here's who to call. It's like you're almost reading our playbook. This is exactly the stuff that we're trying
Well, I'm ready to be hired as a consultant for your business, so just let me know. Let me know.
Dude, I love it, man. Yeah. I think we're kind of wrapping up on time here. I do want to ask some questions because the audience seems to really like some of these homeowner tips.
Yeah.
Right? You've seen enough and know enough about homes and the systems and the maintenance and all that stuff. What's the number one thing that you see on home inspection reports that really, really messes up homeowners in the sale of their home? And what's the thing that they could do to prevent that starting now?
Yeah. For anyone who's listening that lives anywhere near the South where the vernacular of home is common to have a crawl space, I would argue that the best bang for buck of paying someone else, or even the best bang for your buck of spending your own time as a homeowner, is having someone look in your crawl space. Because the crawl space conceptually was meant to be a maintenance space. I can access my floors, my plumbing, my electrical, my ducting, whatever. And so the fact that nobody goes down there very often means all of those major systems could be having problems, which can create all sorts of like cost for a homeowner. And so what's the best bang for your buck? What's the thing that comes up on a lot of home inspection reports? It's crawl space issues. Anything from loose and dangerous wires to standing water to pipes that are dripping to animals and bugs. Or here in the South, Mother Nature's throwing water at us in 3 different ways. It's coming up from the ground, it's hanging out in the air, it's coming down from the sky. It's a full-on assault, and water is the enemy of the home. And so anytime that you can get knowledge about areas that you don't see. Look, we know you're looking at the corner of your master bedroom ceiling. You're just looking up at that. We don't need you to, we're not worried about that because you're going to see it if there's a problem. The areas where you're not looking is where the biggest issues are.
Yes.
And so attics and crawl spaces, but really specifically crawl spaces.
That's great advice, dude. We saw that a lot in restoration, man.
Yeah.
All the time. And it tends to be the most expensive fix for homeowners because, your point, they haven't been down there in 10 years.
Yes.
And then they do go down there or they try to sell their home, and it is a molded nightmare.
Yeah. And be careful if you are not yet ready to go down there and be your own inspector. If you are a homeowner, be careful of who you are asking to go on your behalf down there.
Yeah.
Because the vast majority of people who are willing to go for free or cheap are actually salespeople masquerading as inspectors who are trying to sell you a product du jour.
Yep. Encapsulation
system or a pest control treatment or whatever. You may need those things, but just use, to the best of your abilities, trustworthy individuals, either through finding them on platforms which has built a lot of consumer trust,
like my home,
or using people who literally are the unbiased third parties. And this is a plug for home inspectors. They don't just exist in the transaction of real estate, but also adjacent to the ownership of real estate too.
Dude, I mean, that is perfect. I couldn't say it better. For those listening, all you have to do is download the My Home app, go in there, hire a home inspector, and they'll come out and perform that inspection for you. I think getting that third party that doesn't have a say in the remediation or the fix of the problem is huge for trust of, hey, this is an actual problem. Then if you get one of our trusted home inspectors to come out and do it, and they say, yeah, this is a big problem, I would recommend having a professional company come out here, You go back to My Home, you hire a mold remediation company, and they can come and solve the problem for you. Or you can have multiple quotes and get multiple companies out there, right?
Yeah, and the differential quotes is what you want as a consumer to find the most trustworthy company at the best price.
That's right.
However, we all struggle from this, but you may not know what the scope is needed. And so companies might quote you different scopes you don't even fully realize. The analogy I always give is don't just go to the pharmacist and say, give me some drugs to fix my problems. Because the pharmacist will be like, I don't really know what your problems are. You first have to go to a doctor to tell you what the problems are. And then you take the prescription to the pharmacist so that you can get the remedy for your problem. If you skip an unbiased third party to give you good, solid information, aka the scope or prescription of what you need, then you're just going to be getting lots of people throwing pills at you to try to solve your problems. And one of them might work, but you might also pay a lot of extra money for things you don't need.
That's a great way to put it, man. And that's why, something we're introducing is these kind of tiered approaches for kind of more hands-off maintenance type stuff. And part of one of those tiers has an annual home inspection, right? We want to have the doctor go out and go, hey, this is looking good, this is looking bad, this is looking good. Here's what you recommend over the next 12 months to make sure that the next report that comes in next year is looking better than this.
Yeah. I think what the modern consumer needs, we're going to borrow a word from other parts of business, workflow. That is a sequence of events that, when done together, create both an efficient and well-spent experience.
Yep.
And so we need people to understand that there's a workflow to different parts of maintenance of the home. And if you skip aspects of that workflow, it makes it a more of a herky-jerky and sometimes more expensive experience.
Yes, that is, dude. Wait, how do we get the word? This is one of my last questions, and then we can start wrapping. How do we get this word out at a significant pace, right? Because it only helps both of our businesses, A, but B, most importantly, it helps the homeowners. And that's what we're both trying to do. So, I mean, what's the best way that we can, other than doing things like this, and maybe that's the answer, but how do we get this out to homeowners and help them understand the problem?
I think we need to stop thinking, and this is like advice for me.
Yeah.
I think we need to stop thinking about homeowners as a single box. There are so many different types of homeowners.
Big time.
And there are these segments of the population that are either already congregating at other places, either digitally or in person. And I think we need to work sequentially through these different segments. And so finding people that are already expressing a need for this, however that looks, people who are already going to Home Depot, for example, I'm not suggesting you go hawk your products outside of Home Depot, but it's kind of like that idea, like go to where the people already are. Yeah. That's something that I'm focusing on right now. And so my hope is that we're organically going to the lowest hanging fruit first, and then spreading like wildfire throughout the larger homeowner population from there.
Dude, we are aligned completely 100% on most of our thoughts here, dude. And it's
good stuff.
That's rare. So we got to get you back in, dude. This was by far my favorite conversation we've had in here. And I think we're at like 60 of these now. And this is by far the best one.
Good. I appreciate you.
We're very aligned. That's why we're building what we're building. So I'm happy to kind of keep working together, figure out a way we can make this even more, together, and have you back in and keep the conversation going.
Yeah. All right, man. Good to talk to you.
Thanks for your time.